A proposal to control and tax marijuana qualified for California's November general election ballot. It's called the Regulate, Control, and Tax Cannabis Act. It would overturn the almost century-long prohibition on the drug. It would also allow people over the age of 21 to possess, or it would allow people over 21 to possess, cultivate, or transport pot for personal use, and permit local governments to regulate, and most importantly, if you're in California, tax the drug. Smoking marijuana in public or driving under the influence would remain illegal. Plan proponents say it would raise $1.4 billion for the cash-strapped state. They argue it is in line with Americans' changing view of the specific drug. The most recent Gallup poll on marijuana shows a record high 44% of Americans now support its legalization. That is a 10 percentage point jump since just 2001. You may not know this, but the United States is the world's largest consumer of marijuana. 26 million Americans using pot in 2008 alone. That's about 1 in 10 Americans. It's already California's most lucrative cash crop. Providing the counter-narrative, however, law enforcement officials who say legalizing marijuana could spur an increase in crime, and other anti-drug activists who fear a general denigration of society. But let's give this state debate some broader context. It's not just California. Let's talk about Mexico, America, and the drug connection. New this week, the National Drug Threat Assessment by the Department of Justice, which found Mexican drug cartels ramping up production in their country, while increasing the flow of meth, heroin, and yes, pot into our country. Quite simply, it means Mexico gets the violence and Americans buy the drugs. More than 18,000 people in violent death in Mexico since the government there declared their war on drugs 3 years ago. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in Mexico just this week, offering a recommitment to help Mexico fight the drug cartels with an additional $1.4 billion in aid. We should point out that the drug cartels net $25 billion a year in criminal earnings, and 60% of those profits come from, you guessed it, marijuana. So between the multi-billion-dollar cost of fighting a war on drugs, billions more spent to incarcerate those who are caught, and a stunning and violent body count, not to mention, perhaps most importantly, the potential political destabilization and development of a narco state on the U.S. southern border with Mexico, who is our most important, or one of our two most important trading partners, along with Canada. What is the solution for a problem that has, for so many, no good answers, but it certainly has tremendous and increasing costs? Joining us now, General Barry McCaffrey, former U.S. drug czar and MSNBC military analyst, and Paul Armentano, Deputy Director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Paul, I guess I will begin with you. What do you find is the most compelling argument that you can offer as to why voting yes on a ballot like this fall would be a good idea?
Well, look, we've got 18,000 dead since 2006 in Mexico because of U.S. drug policies, particularly the policies pertaining to the use and trafficking of marijuana. You said in your opening monologue, 60% or over 60% of the profits that the cartels make come from the exportation of marijuana from Mexico to the United States. To continue the same policies we've been going on all these years is the very definition of insanity. It is time to take the production and distribution of marijuana away from these violent cartels and put it into the hands of licensed businesses. The way we do that is through legalization and through regulation. The prohibition that we have now is anarchy. Regulation would bring needed controls to this market.
Who is winning today with regard to this failed policy? And I have 6 groups. Travel along with me and see if you agree. The first group, obviously, are the drug lords. Big-time drug dealers. They're making hundreds of millions, billions of dollars every year, tax-free, by the way, and they're clearly winning. The number 2 group of people that are winning are those in juvenile gangs. Pretty much every juvenile gang we have in our country gets its primary source of funding for the sale of illegal drugs, and now they're using it as a recruiting tool to bring more children into this lifestyle because they too can be part of the action and make some money. Number 3 group of people that are winning are basically those in law enforcement that are making big-time government money to fight against the first 2 groups. And I'm not pointing the finger at law enforcement. They haven't failed us any more for the war on drugs than Eliot Ness failed us with regard to the war on alcohol. But it's the system. But nevertheless, their bureaucracies have expanded, their amounts of money, their power have all expanded as well. They're winning. 4th group of people are the politicians that basically talk tough with regard to the war on drugs, not smart, but they get elected and re-elected by talking tough. Of course, it's our fault because we continue to elect them, but they come out ahead. Number 5 groups are those in the private sector that make money because of increased crime. Who might that be? Obviously, the people that build prisons, enormously lucrative occupation. People that staff prisons. In the state of California, the Prison Guards Union is the strongest political lobby group we have. They're winning, and of course, they're laughing at us. And the 6th group of people that are winning are the terrorist organizations of the world. You look at any terrorist organization from Osama bin Laden or anywhere else, the primary source of funding is drug money. It's the sale of illegal drugs, to the degree that I say that drug prohibition is the golden goose of terrorism. And if our government really wanted to do something damaging to terrorist groups around the world, they would take the one step that would do that: repeal drug prohibition. Who is losing? Everybody else. I've been speaking actively against our nation's drug policy since 1992. The first national TV show I was on, they basically stacked it with a lot of parents of drug problems for their kids. And the first question I got was, why are you trying to kill my son? And it kind of got worse from there. That doesn't happen anymore. People are beginning to understand. There is an initiative now in California to treat marijuana like alcohol for adults. What would happen if this were to pass? Well, 6 things. The first 5 demonstrably beneficial, then we'll talk about the 6th. The first thing that would happen is we in the state of California as taxpayers literally could save hundreds of millions of dollars per year, if not $1 billion a year, that now we actually spend in a futile effort to try to eradicate marijuana as well as to prosecute and incarcerate nonviolent marijuana offenders. And of course, you can tell how successful we are in the eradication of marijuana because it's still the largest cash crop in the state of California. And number 2 is grapes, by the way, if you care. So that's $1 billion or so that we can save. Number 2, we could tax the silly stuff and generate revenue, according to the chair of the State Board of Equalization, of about $1.3 billion every year. So now that's about a $2.3 billion shift in the budget deficit for the state of California. You'd think somebody would notice. But the third thing trumps the first 2, and that is we would make marijuana less available for children than it is today. That is something that really does deserve a great deal of attention. Number 4, the entire hemp industry could be revitalized. It goes back thousands of years to the degree that in ancient Greek the word canvas and cannabis were synonymous. They were the same word. And we have simply thwarted that entire really important industrial purpose. We do have our merchants using hemp today, and by the way, hemp, you know, is just the stalk of the marijuana plant. It has no mind-altering properties whatsoever, but it can be used for all kinds of really beneficial purposes. So now our merchants import the raw material from those radical countries like Canada and England, for heaven's sake, penalizing ourselves and our own agricultural purposes. You'd think that we could somehow realize what's going on, because the Canadian hemp field is worth, about $1 billion a year. And the 5th thing, this entire medical marijuana issue would pretty much dissolve, and hooray for that. It would get some control on it, regulate it, control it, tax it, and bring it back under the law. Then there's the 6th thing. What's that going to do to marijuana usage by adults? And any economist, of course, will tell you that's really pretty simple. It will increase marijuana use by adults. All things being equal. But all things are not going to be equal. We'll probably soon start experiencing what I call the Holland effect. Because in Holland, anybody 16 years of age or older can go to a coffee house and can get coffee and sandwiches and tea and also marijuana and hashish. The Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference not all that long ago and said, we in our country have only half the marijuana consumption per capita as you do in the United States of America, both for adults and for teenagers. Wait a minute, you hear that? Both for adults and for teenagers. Then went on to explain why. You know what he said? He said, "We have succeeded in making pot boring. People that are supporting the status quo are on the wrong side of history, just like the people that the Billy Sundays and the Anslingers and the rest who supported alcohol prohibition were on the wrong side of history. It's just a question of when." And then I guarantee anyone who will listen that 2 years after we change away from this failed and hopeless policy, everybody will join arms, look back astonished, aghast that we could have perpetuated such a failed system for so long. The best thing I can do for my country is to help us repeal drug prohibition. It's the most patriotic thing that I'm able to do, and we're going to be successful.